Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Bishop-elect Vanessa M. Brown. I'm happy to be here with you on this evening. And remember, I want you to shout out where you are from. If you welcome Facebook, welcome Instagram, welcome YouTube, welcome Twitter. And if you are on any one of those platforms, I'm going to ask you tonight to please share the Facebook link or the Instagram link or whatever it is that you're on. Also, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor and like Beyond the Gatekeepers page. That's very important to us as well. And so tonight we have, for 2 weeks, we've talked about African spirituality, indigenous faith. And so tonight we're going to talk about faith and reckoning after Trump. And we have a very great guest, an author of several books. Some of you may know him from his book, Reading the Bible from the Margins. Others may know him from Decolonizing Christianity, Becoming Badass Believers, which I love. But tonight we're going to talk probably about a mixture of all of them. Faith and Reckoning After Trump. He's a great author. And we want to bring to you our first guest tonight, Dr. Miguel de la Torre. He's a professor at ILIF. He's an author. He's a scholar, an activist, and we are so very happy to have him here tonight, Dr. De La Torre. It is a blessing. He is the he's a professor, of social ethics and Latinx studies at ILIF School of Theology in Denver, Colorado. He's also an ordained Southern Baptist minister. He is the author, again, as I said, of many books, including Reading the Bible from the Margins, Introducing Liberative Theologies, and Trails of Hope and Terror. And of course, the editor of this book that we're going to talk about tonight, Faith and Resistance in the Age of Trump. And so we are excited about him and his presence. Dr. Miguel, will you greet our audiences, please?
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here. And hello to everybody out there. And I'm looking forward to a fun conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And of course, we have with us Bishop Carlton D. Pearson. He is an author, progressive spiritual teacher, and thought leader. So happy to have you here tonight with us, Bishop Pearson. Will you greet our audiences, please?
Hello, everybody. Missed you the last couple of weeks. Great to be back home with my powerful sisters and my new brother tonight. The aggressive and disruptive, unforgiving mindset that characterizes so much of American politics today has found a home and almost a headquarters in many American churches, particularly the white evangelical fundamentalist church. That has to be addressed. It cannot go unnoticed or ignored. It needs to be both confronted and in some ways combated, because it is corroding the culture. And it should be the consciousness of Christ, and instead it's a consciousness of anger and racism and bigotry. And we just have to keep talking about it, bringing attention to it, so that we can be intentional about making it go away. We're going to have a great time tonight. We have a brilliant scholar and a man with a mind that's going to really open up some stuff that has us all on edge to hear and see and feel tonight's conversation. So glad you're all here. I'm always thrilled.
Thank you so much, Bishop Pearson, for that. And of course, we have our presiding bishop, Bishop Yvette Adrian Flunder. She's a presiding prelate of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, of course, and the senior pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ in Oakland, California. They will be celebrating 30 years on next year. Bishop Flunder, on next month. Bishop Flunder, please greet our audience.
Well, it is, of course, my great joy to be in the company of our Gatekeepers family all over the United States and in countries abroad. We've been together for quite some time now. One of the blessings of the COVID, let's put it that way, is that we have extended our family reach in so many ways. We've missed Bishop Pearson for a couple of our Wednesdays, and we just had to press our way until he could come home back and be with us, because he brings so much to our time together. I just really love this man, and I'm so grateful to God for him. And tonight, we have the privilege and opportunity to spend some time with Dr. Miguel A. de la Torre. And I have to say that he is a synergistic spiritual person who is involved and engaged in the presence of the divine in several different ways. I find it wonderful to embrace indigenous faith and be a Southern Baptist at the same time. He's going to tell us more about how that synergy works. But I can say that as a Pentecostal who's very much connected to indigenous faith at the same time, that it's a wonderful journey. I must say that it is a wonderful journey. He has written some incredible books. And I'll use his colloquial, that's in one of his book titles, what he called badass books. You know, I think it's time to have that kind of conversation, to understand that vernacular and what does it really mean to speak back into this atmosphere. So we welcome you, brother. We are glad you are with us, Bishop Pearson and I, Bishop-elect Vanessa, and all of those who are out there who are listening for voices that are prophetic, that are prepared to speak truth to power, to pay the price for that, and to be engaged in changing the face and the message of the negative notions that are coming from church and society. So we welcome you, brother, and let's talk. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Bishop Flunder. And so I want to start off with Dr. Miguel, first of all, by saying that your books have been a blessing to so many. Particularly, I've heard a lot of people talking about decolonizing Christianity, becoming badass believers. And I think it's very powerful, it's impactful, it's for such a time as this. And so I want to thank you for that offering, although I know you have many, many other books. And tonight we want to talk about this latest offering that you have put together. And I want to ask you why this book, What happened that caused you all to come together and write this book?
Well, last year, literally before the election was called for Biden, I began to see the pushback of Trump. And I began to realize that after 4 years of Trumpism, there needed to be a response as to how we move forward. So I called the editor at Orbis and said, I want to write this follow-up book, because 4 years ago, I wrote a book, Faith and Resistance in the Age of Trump, when Trump was elected. So this was going to be a follow-up. He gave me the blessings, and I contacted some of the top scholars and activists that I know, and with the charge that they had to give me a chapter 2 weeks after the inauguration of Biden. So it was a short-term, a very short time window there. And what we saw was all of the attempts to overthrow the election, including the January 6th insurrection. And we captured that time in history, that roughly month and a half or 2 months and a half between the election and the inauguration, and got the book to the publisher the beginning of February, and it just came out this week.
Thank you so much for that. It was a brilliant thing to do. And I want to add, because we have been in conversation for some time, and I think that I said to you, Dr. Miguel, that it reads like an epistle from different ones. Like some of the stuff that Bishop Flunder has been talking about, in terms of getting another canon and writing, this fits perfectly within that frame. Bishop Flunder?
I am so sure that the future of Christianity will look back on this time, something that in some ways Bishop Pearson and I have both said and support. They will look back on this time, the readings of the COVID, this time period when we have been so rich with new thought and new concepts that are speaking into what we call this perfect storm, for lack of a better way to say it, this combination of the earth and its issues, politics and those issues, this last very desperate cry of conservative religion and racism and despots in terms of leaders of countries and nations and such the like. I don't know that in my lifetime, I've not seen such a perfect storm. I suspect that the reality perhaps has happened in some way historically. At least folks thought it was a perfect storm, but we literally are living in one. And what is born out of that, it seems to me, are epistles and writings that will hopefully be pulled together at some point, and people can look at the COVID writings. What happened during this season? What did we say? How are we impacted? And how did we change for the better or for the worse? And I appreciate so much, not only your contributions, but the contributions of the people that you called together, and you made them write real quick. Something that a couple of my friends are making some of us do. I have a chapter or two coming up, but it's the same kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? It's almost a collective desperation. We need to get it on paper, and we need to say some things about the time that we are in. And so we're grateful. You pulled together a robust group of folks, and they said some robust things. So thank you for your contribution, brother.
Thank you. You mentioned this time of a perfect storm. And that is so true. And it's important to realize that this storm has been brewing for so many centuries in this continent, that what we're seeing, there's this rise of Trump. Trump is not really the issue. He's really unimportant. He is the culmination of this perfect storm. He is what is the conclusion of centuries of a Christianity which is not what James Cone back in the 60s called a satanic Christianity that has nothing to do with the gospel. So when over 80% of evangelical voted for Trump, when the majority of white Catholics voted for Trump, the majority of white Protestants voted for Trump, the majority of white Mormons voted for Trump, this faith that these individuals have, I think, becomes a faith, if we want to leave this perfect storm, it becomes a faith that those of us in the margins have to reject. And we have to think of constructing our Christian faith based on our own symbols and our own signs, and stop using a Eurocentric Christianity as our guide.
Yes.
Question on a question. How does that happen, brother?
Yeah, exactly.
How does that happen? What's the path?
You mean the path forward, or how did we get to this point?
No. How do we live what you just suggested is the remedy?
I can only speak for myself. My mind has been so colonized by this white Eurocentric Christianity that I have learned to look at reality through the lens of those who have profited off of my labor and my cheap resources. In other words, when I went to theological school, I had to be proficient in white theology, in white ethics, in white liturgy, in white history, to the point that I did not know the contributions of my own people. And then what I learned in seminary became the highest standard of academic rigor, while my colleagues never had to read Katie Cannon, or had to read Stacey Floyd Thomas, or had to read Ana Maria Isasi Diaz or Justo Gonzalez. And yet I was the one that was seen as not being fully educated. So I guess how we move forward is we must decolonize our mind. We must reject this Eurocentric Christianity that has become so much a part of our very fiber, and begin to relook at the gospel from our own social locations.
That's excellent. Thank you for that. Bishop Pearson, would you like to chime in?
As I've said several times in the last few months, that American Christians, particular white evangelical Christians, have gotten King James and King Jesus mixed up, thinking they are the same people or that they're similar people, and they aren't. Both of their mother's name is Mary. One's Mary the Virgin, and the other is Mary, Queen of Scots. But his language in 16th century King's English, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to all of the creatures, that has somehow sunk into the deepest psyche of the colonialist, enslaved them and saved them. They tied going to Africa, India, Asia, but particularly Africa when it comes to us African Americans, they justify their hatred of us. First of all, they don't see us as human. Colonialists don't see other people groups or ethnicities or nationalities as on the same level. They King James wrote his book, came out 1611, and we arrived here around 1618, I think. And so the foundation had already been laid. Columbus was told by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, from whom he borrowed the money for the only successful trip across here to the Caribbean. They said, evangelize the natives and find gold. But when they went to Africa, they had that same intention in mind, even though it wasn't Columbus, it was the Brits and the English people. We're the gold, and they evangelize us. So they enslaved us to save us, and actually told us if it wasn't for them, we Christians, we Africans would be worshiping demons and heathens and going to hell. And I heard that as a kid. So that's deep in the psyche and soul of a lot of these people. And they don't feel that it's evil for them to do. And then when Trump was able to add open hatred and resentments to the political religious stance of so-called true believers, it crossed a line. Tribal instincts seem to have become overwhelming. The dominance of a political religion over professed religion is seen, for many as loyalty to Trump and loyalty to Jesus. The mixture is so absurd, so ludicrous, so painfully obscene. And we have to cry loud and spare not, quote unquote, show my people their transgressions, the house of Jacob their sin. It's deep seated in the culture for hundreds of years. And these books that Dr. Miguel has written and are putting out, and for us to discuss it again and again and again and spread the word, we have to create this conversation even when it becomes heated. We have to stay in front of the people with this face, because this is the end of that colonialistic imperialism mentality. And they're fighting with all, that's what January 6th was. And they're planning to do some other things. They just are demonized and under the spell of this racist mentality. It cannot go unmentioned or unnoticed or unnoted and combated.
Absolutely. In this book, Dr. Miguel, you cover so many topics. You go from, a fractured truth in post-Trump America, the critical role of Black women, the tension between democracy and whiteness, the political theology of QAnon, which is, I think that people need to know that, environmental violence, racism and Black Lives Matter, ministry in a divided church and nation, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, Catholic faith in the public square, and the future of evangelical Christianity. I mean, like, you all hit every area that needs to be talked about. Tell me why you all chose some of those topics and choose one of them that you'd like to talk about a little bit.
As I was trying to put the book together, I wanted to be sure that as many voices that could be heard were heard. So I tried to find individuals in different communities that could speak into this, as was said, this perfect storm. I wanted to make sure I had evangelicals speaking, Muslims speaking, Jews speaking, Catholics, nuns speaking, people from different races and ethnicity as part of the conversation, to try to create a community among people, and unfortunately to say, that many times don't speak to each other. I mean, one of the things that I have always struggled with is that as a Latino man, while I'm always upset that my white colleagues don't bother to read the works of the Latinx community, if we're honest, sometimes our own communities of colors don't read each other's works. And hence, we don't have that beautiful cross-pollination that could push our ideas forward. Not that we all agree, obviously we don't, but we could challenge each other in ways that are not as death dealing as when our white colleagues challenge us. So the idea of bringing these different voices was to create that community, or you could even say the beloved community, where we can at least learn from each other and learn how we each come to this issue of faith and reckoning after Trump.
Thank you for that. So many people are leaving the ministry. So many people are leaving their churches, regardless of whether they're retiring now at this point or whether they just say that they can't go on after these 2 years of being in the pandemic. And so much has happened through the Trump administration. And so people are actually giving up. Your book is called Faith After Trump. Would you say that people are still full of faith, or are they full of fear?
I think there's a lot of fear, because that motivates people to vote a certain way. And the church many times become complicit in becoming fearmongers, so as to move a people to vote against their best interests. But when it comes to faith, there will always be faith. The question is, does the church have faith? All too often, the church and here there's, want to be white churches that are complicit with a philosophy and a theology that has been detrimental to communities of color since the beginning of colonialism, or churches of color that have always had that thread of liberation, but many times become captured by the dominant Eurocentric church and attempts to imitate them, believing that somehow that makes them more rigorous. For those churches that are dead, maybe the best thing is for the dead to bury the dead and let them leave, and let the church of the people, the faith of the people, propel us forward in this call for liberation. Maybe the church sometimes just have to get out of the way of the people who are ready to live out the gospel.
Bishop Flunder, and then Bishop Pearson.
I read an article the other day that I think I sent along to you, Bishop-elect Vanessa. That was a particular evangelical woman who was addressing a conservative evangelical group. This was in and around COVID. And she said to them, that essentially people who believe in Jesus should be prepared to die. And that you may have read this, Dr. De La Torre, and that there's no shame in dying. Essentially, it is what we have lived to do. And she was saying this in relationship to her frustration about people masking and social distancing and not coming to worship because they were concerned. She was essentially, in fact, she didn't essentially say it. She basically said it, that if you risk your life, you haven't done any more or any less than the people who were the martyrs in the 1st century AD. If you risk your life to come on to worship and take the risk, sans the mask, sans the social distancing, and if you die for Jesus. And I thought when I read it, I couldn't believe it. First of all, that first of all, it came from a woman, which disturbed me terribly, who is also a mother. Secondly, to somehow create martyrdom for masks and social distancing. And add that to the potential martyrdom of some of the people who stormed the Capitol, or the martyrdom of the many who have died from COVID, who have deathbed repentance, perhaps about maybe I should have had the vaccine, or maybe I should have, whatever the case may be. And in my thinking about it, I said, it's moving to the edge. Can I use that? And not so much that we did not anticipate it, but to have a death cult in and around the determination not to take a directive from what they believe is an errant administration. Now, because that is what a lot of this is. It's because the Bidens are recommending that you get vaccinated. The Bidens have put this together with Fauci, and the Bidens and the Kamala Harris are the ones who are responsible for this. So we can't do it. We can eat horse dewormer, but we can't social distance, and we can't get vaccinated, and we can't. And now we are getting ready to die as sort of a death cult for Jesus. And the thought of
Very Jim Jones, very Jim
deeply
Jones.
Jim Jones. Like it's kind of like, and the reason I lift it up is because you painted yourself into a corner. And then I see people in this corner theologically now trying to sanctify that corner by somehow suggesting that we will die for Jesus. Jesus, they said, excuse me for waxing really black for a moment. Jesus ain't said nothing about dying for COVID. Okay. Jesus ain't said nothing about that. Okay. But we now hand it over to Jesus. It's a worthy way to die. So you die, you die. And so you die. And in some cases, mothers and fathers leaving 5 or 6 children without any future. It's amazing to me what it is. So I thought to myself, to your point, and to Bishop Pearson's point, that we are hitting a wall now. When people begin to say that, a suicide cult, in a sense, who is intent on stopping abortions. What an oxymoron. Isn't that an oxymoron? What an oxymoron. In the belief in life, essentially being the reason that they don't want women to have a right to choose. But it's okay to die in order to take your mask off and be together without, and packed up on each other with no protection. So we are hitting a wall. There's a wall. And I think that it may happen, Bishop Pearson, it may happen that a group of people, Jim Jones, because this is a part, a way of Jim Jonesing. So I want to lay that out there as a Californian who lived right around the corner from People's Temple in San Francisco. I really do know what this kind of thing can make happen. But it amazed me that it was coming from a woman and a mother. And I want to kind of just lay that down there for a minute.
Bishop, unmute yourself.
How do I do that? What did I do wrong?
You're on.
Okay, I'm sorry. The Christian faith is built on sacrifice, which is victimization. Sacrifice was the animal became the victim. So our whole religion is fraught with victim consciousness. Trying to appease an angry God or please a difficult God has created a psychosis, a mental illness. And the coronavirus is both biological and psychological warfare. It's placed religious communities under extraordinary strain. They think maybe it came as the judgment of God because America rejected Trump. Or it's God angry at the culture because of abortion or gay rights or same-sex marriage. Most Christians, evangelicals, and I was one for 50 years, and in many ways I still am one because I believe in the good news, but we're sick. Our minds are sick. Everyone in America has felt the effects of this virus. For many Christians, it's been a bar to gathering and worship together. We're traumatized by that. We don't share communion. We're not performing baptisms and saying these common prayers and practicing all of our rituals and our liturgies. And that is an idol to us. That's how we supposedly access God. So we're out there floating and then watching the media or listening to the media, social media included. There's so many messages, so much confusion, so many voices, so many choices. The Christian churches themselves are breaking up. Many of these fundamentalist churches, and remember, racism and the Civil War was the worst and most passionate war in American history. More people died, and that was Southern Baptist, not by that title, but by that spirit of slavery and anti-abolition that came in and became the Southern Baptist Church. And so that's the largest expression of Protestant Christianity on the planet. The Southern Baptist Church. I have to bring that out. No reflection on our beloved doctor tonight. But that religious spirit, not being in community has destabilized what has long been a core sense of Christian identity. So the people don't even know what to think anymore. The preachers are trying to be delicate because they have both positions in their churches. The people are actually splitting. The boards of voting pastors out, fighting pastors. Pastors and board members are divided among themselves. Young people are leaving by the hundreds of thousands from our evangelical churches. Parents are frustrating. They're rejecting the faith of their fathers. So there's a real breakdown. Christianity as we've known it is in serious trouble. The pandemic exposed and exacerbated weaknesses and vulnerabilities and habits of mind and heart that have already been there. But the psychological warfare behind all these has so frightened us. People are not even sure if this is God, because if it is God, then he's not protecting his people from the virus and from dying. Church of God in Christ. We had so many bishops, as you know, Bishop Flunder, so many of our top, my minister of music's father, Bishop Smith, was one of the first bishops to die of COVID because of a workers' meeting, a convocation. I know preachers who are arrested and on their way to jail or are in jail because they insisted on having gatherings of the saints, and people died. So they're really confused even what God's opinion on some of this is. And we haven't seen the worst of it. When it's said and done, our churches will be so fractured. The things that we're talking about will have become very evident. We'll never reassemble the way we once did. It's just going to happen anymore. Something, we don't know what's going to replace it, but it won't be as it was in the 20th century, when all of that was very powerful, very practical, almost prophetic, and has become pathetic. And the root of this discord lies in the fact that many Christians have embraced the worst aspects of our culture and our politics. They're looking for that. When Christian faith is politicized, churches become repositories not of grace, but of guilt and of grievances. They don't preach Christ. They preach crisis to each other. We're in trouble. Second coming, end time false prophets, the Antichrist, whom Donald Trump really is, if I can just say it. He is the Antichrist, one of them. And so this whole spirit of confusion has eroded and corroded, and we're dealing with severe mental illness. And you're going to see a lot of outbreaks in the streets with guns and blood and cussing and fussing, churches torn apart, families torn apart. There's a high divorce rate. There's a high suicide rate in the church as much as out. There's uses of drugs and alcoholism, people going to jail. And so that's the whole country. But the church should be the answer. And it's the biggest question that it's ever been. Unfortunately, nobody understands. Not even the church itself understands what its purpose is anymore.
Absolutely, Bishop. And I want to, first of all, before I go to Dr. Miguel, I want to make sure that our Facebook Live audience is still with us. And I see that they are asking questions, the early questions that are coming up for Facebook Live, YouTube, Instagram. And we ask that you continue to share this conversation. It's a robust conversation. Many of you have joined in tonight, and we want to say that we appreciate you for joining Beyond the Gatekeepers tonight. Dr. Miguel, so we've heard, we know what's been going on. We know the symptoms, and we see what the disease has done and is doing to us as a people, right? Particularly Black and brown people. And so, as Bishop Flunder said, you made a point to say that, churches were not going to be the same, and maybe that some churches should die, based upon what their paradigms are. Can you tell us a little bit more about that thought process and some of that? Because even some of the writings even lend towards that, that people are moving away, as Bishop Pearson said, from what we used to see. Can you say more?
There's no question that the church has failed the people, mainly because it has been institutionalized, sometimes into another business, following more the U.S. capitalist model than the gospel model. So when I say if a church is dead, let it die and let the bury the dead, such churches take away from the message of the gospel. And the message of the gospel, and we know that these churches are sick because, as Bishop Flunder was talking about this cult of death, your Christianity is a cult of death. It is a church that is based on people dying, and somehow that being the best thing because you get to go to heaven and enjoy riches. And yet Jesus in John 10:10 says, I have come to give life and give life abundantly. Not in some future, but in the here and now. So whatever the church becomes, whatever the church is, it has to be a place where there is abundant life, where life flows. One of the things that womanist scholars have taught me, like Cheryl Cook-Dugan, is that there is nothing redemptive about suffering. We place so much emphasis on the cross as somehow that is the end all for purity and for salvation, and ignore that what the cross really is. It's a way of killing and destroying innocent, pure people. And today, so many continue to hang on the crosses of racism and ethnic discrimination and classism and homophobia. So we don't need more crosses. We need more conversations about resurrection. And the entire message of the Jesus story is salvific, not just that one moment of pure suffering. So the type of church that the future needs is this type of church that rejects this Eurocentric Christianity, going back to 1100 with Anselm and his whole substitution theology that has done more damage to the church, to the message of the gospel, than probably any other theologian since. So this is what I'm talking about when I say about rejecting this Eurocentric Christianity. And what will Christianity look like if we embrace bear or bear rabbit? Or in my culture, what would Christianity look like if we embrace el igual or Pepito? What are our symbols by which we read the gospel message? And I think when we move in that direction, it will become so much more attractive to our own people, and it will be life-giving rather than continuing, as the both bishops just talked about, this culture of death, this cult of death.
Go ahead, Bishop.
So let me be as transparent as I dare be, okay, in this conversation. And as a person who leads leaders and is much like all of you in several ways, and that has the potential over time and as we grow in numbers to become almost denominational in the way in which we exist. Can I say it that way? Because that's sort of how denominations began, how movements became institutionalized. And having lived through several movements, civil rights movements, LGBT movements, women's movements, HIV movements, all kinds of movements, there was a certain way that we were when we were early in the movements. I think you understand what I'm saying. Then over time, we became institutionalized, and we had rules and regulations, and we had order, and we had systems. And the more systems and rules and regulations and order we had, the more we seem to have departed from our purpose and intention. I hope that makes sense. And I find myself asking myself, as a person who is a leader in and of a movement, what can we decide to do now that will prohibit us from becoming everything that we abhor? What can we decide to do now that will change the inevitability of just about everything that I know of that religiously began in a certain way? Kind of the conversation we had. I don't remember if Bishop Pearson was with us that night. He probably was. If he wasn't, he definitely was there in spirit. That embraced Charles Harrison Mason, the founder of the Church of God in Christ, and they knew he was a root worker. Everybody knew he was a root worker. In fact, they had pictures of him being a root worker in all their churches. There was nothing strange about people from Mississippi and the Carolinas and all that being root workers. That was a part of our African indigenous realities, right? But somewhere along the line, somebody told him, don't do that. Cut that out. My grandfather shared with me that they did tell him, don't do that anymore. We need to and pull all those pictures down of you and these roots, because people are going to think it's witchcraft and such the like. Yeah. You understand what I'm talking about. And that's kind of the way it happens. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? That the need to appear to be more acceptable by the masses.
Yes.
Do you understand?
That's in every way, though. And I think that part of what you're saying, Bishop Flunder, is what we suffer from, and that is that we always had to appear a certain way. My mother grew up in a Jim Crow era. She was 82, but her responsibility for her siblings was to make sure that they looked a certain way and appeared a certain way, so that when they went before the white people, right, that nothing could be said about the Alfred girls. Right.
Yes.
Nothing could be said about the Alfred girls and their little boy. Right.
Yes.
That was important. Appearances were important. What people thought was important. And it bled over into I don't know if it bled over to what we believe in terms of our religious beliefs, or if we brought that over from our culture. I don't know where it came from, but I know that it affects us till today. Right. Even that whole statement of trying to keep up with the Joneses, all of that affects how we do church, how we come at church and religion and all of those different things. And that's just a very good point, Bishop. And
to compromise it, can I just say this before Bishop says this? To compromise myself, as people have said, as a same gender loving woman, and say, well, just don't say nothing. Just don't say nothing. Just keep it to yourself. You don't have to talk about it. Even if you're in support of me, Bishop Pearson, don't talk about it. If you talk about it, that it hurts, it will hurt you and hurt what you're trying to do. If you understand it, to the singers who said that, who can't be who they are, and to the preachers who can't be who they are, and to the whole organizations that are made to feel that and I know churches that secretly embrace some of their members, but publicly will never affirm them in all kinds of ways, because they're women, because they're gay, because they're people of color. Well, they will not publicly, for the sake of continuing to reap fiscally and politically in the world. And I keep asking myself, and I just want to put myself out there again. I'll be 67, as I say, on my next birthday. How do I want to end? Because I'm going to end. There's a point at which that reality will happen. And how do we plan to end well and authentically? And are we prepared to pay the price to end well? And so I have seen movements compromise their truth in order to fit. And then the question is, why does that keep happening? Why can't the front guard be truth and honesty and love and peace and equality and affirmation? Why does the front guard of Christianity and other religions have to lie? Why do the liars win in the ways in which people think that winning is winning, if you understand what I'm saying? And I want to lay it out there and say it, because I know I'm not going to compromise. I know I'm going to go down in a big flame before I'll do that. But I am going to say that I have seen some people that I deeply love, and I still cover their secrets. I still do it because they have said to me, I'm going to tell you, but Yvette, for God's sake, don't tell anybody else what I'm about to tell you.
Before Bishop Pearson comes and Dr. Miguel, Reverend Naomi said to what you just said, because lying pays and truth does not.
One of the good things that's happening is we're looking tonight, and I'm very proud of the fact that we're all people of color and of ethnicity. I grew up in Southern California, as you know, with Mexicans mostly, our small community. That when I was 5 miles above the Tijuana border. And white people taught us, most of the school teachers were white, police officers were white, all the business owners were white. You go back to that same community today and it's changed dramatically. My whole neighborhood is almost all Mexican, but not Tijuaneros. They are doctors and business people and preachers, and they've got churches, and so the white minority here in the state of Oklahoma, for the first time in its history, Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian have taken over the majority. The white man in this state is not the majority, and they're literally freaking out. Now that's happening literally across the country. When you turn on television, you see all these marvelous commercials of integrated couples, same gender loving couples, all day. And I heard some fundamentalists who were helping me do some business here. They forgot that I was Black and forgot that I was progressive. So I said, have you noticed what is it with all these integrated couples on commercials? And the lady blurted out, yeah, what's behind all that? She forgot she's talking to me. But I put it out there to see how her response was. And they are so stunned by that, because you turn on television, you see all these brilliant female. There are more females in seminary than males. There are more females in medical school than males. I have a transgender niece, and we have them in our families now. And we embrace her. Her own mother doesn't speak to her, but her grandmother, my sister, went, and she's married to a white girl. He is married to a white girl. They're both nurses. And I'm seeing all this change in the midst of all this other Trumpism and evangelical fundamentalism trying to hold to the past. The past is slipping away. It'll never come back. We're doing this discussion. They are seeing us. They know they're Black people and ethnic people, Asians, a lot of Asians everywhere talking, and they're experts on everything. So white people who are used to, my generation, I'm 69 on my next birthday. We remember the 3 networks. And there wasn't no Blacks, but Stephen Fetchit, and every once in a while, Louis Armstrong, and maybe Ethel Waters, and Amos and Andy. Though now Blacks are everywhere, on everything, running everything, talking. Hispanics are everywhere, even speaking not only with accents, but in clear, precise Western, not Southern, but Western dialect. I'm so thrilled that we're able to have it. Nobody can stop us from doing this. So we're watching a dramatic universal shift in consciousness that is ordained by God. That's the revival. The altars are not filled with people weeping and lifting up their hands to Jesus, but really being born again is awakening in your consciousness to your destiny as a human being on the planet, and that we're all universal, one version or versification of the whole. That's happening without our permission, and we're all part of it.
And I love it. Dr. Miguel?
The follow-up book that I'm presently writing for Decolonizing Christianity is going to be called Apartheid America. And while I celebrate that by 2045, whites will be a minority in this country, I fear that we will be entering into an apartheid America in where the majority may be of color, but power, profit, and privilege will remain in the hands.
They're working on that now.
Of white, and absolutely, and we see that happening with all these voter suppression laws that are being passed throughout the nation. Every time the Census Bureau says that whites are going to become a minority, as you said, it drives them so crazy that they begin to do things like storming the Capitol to make sure that they could hold on to their power. So yes, I celebrate that in one way we're moving in a new direction, but white supremacy and neoliberalism is 10 steps ahead of us, I'm afraid, and is already laying the groundwork to maintain that unearned power, privilege, and profit. So our task is, how do we play tricksters and screw with the system so as to bring about change? I always say that we have to go to the police department to get a permit from the police department so we could protest the police department for police brutality. We have domesticated even how we protest. So how do we begin to move beyond the rules that were created to make sure that apartheid continues in this country?
So powerful, Dr. Miguel. We have some questions that are coming up. We're going to give people the opportunity to ask questions, but there are already some that are in the chat, and all of you all can chime in. And so the first question is: should churches of color and their leaders get involved in requesting that Donald Trump is charged with high treason and the effects it has had on its congregations? And
Absolutely.
Without question. Absolutely. If this man is not tried for his crimes, the gangsters and the gangs in our country are all watching this, and they're going to intensify in their anger and their violence. Donald Trump is a thug. He's a gang leader in a three-piece suit. And the whole world has watched his arrogance and his obscenities and his foolishness. Most people are afraid, but I respect the solemnity of the office. I do not respect that man. In fact, I suspect him. And he is a criminal, and the people around him, nearly all the people around him have gone to prison, have been indicted, and are being arrested. And so we're watching this, but our young people are watching how this man got by with what he did: open racism, open arrogance, open ignorance, open violence. And, he's so unfiltered, and he doesn't care. When he was able to add, again, this open hatred and resentment to the political religious stance, it really did cross the line. The dominance of political religion over professed religion. The result is that many Christians, followers of Trump, have come to see a gospel of hatreds and resentments and vilifications and denunciations and put downs and insults. And that's not Christianity. How can we embrace a mouth or mind or man like that? The church needs to repent. So Black church needs to wake up too, because we've listened to the message of the massa and have gotten into it, and we're just as much, some of us are just as much of a cult follower of those concepts, and we're endorsing them or embracing them, and we don't even realize we do, because it still gets us tithes and offerings on Sunday mornings. As I said, many of those churches can't say Black Lives Matter, but they do say Black tithes matter. That's got to change.
Dr. Miguel?
There is no question that Donald Trump has created crimes and misdemeanors against the United States of America. He has done treasonous acts with the Ukraine and trying to get information from there, with Russia, with exciting a rebellion against a free and open election. My hopelessness comes in that he was already tried, and the Senate refused to convict. My fear is that everything Bishop Pearson said of the wrong message it is sending has already been sent. So the question then becomes, not should we try him again? If we can, yes, by all means. I don't see that happening. I don't see any kind of conviction, unfortunately. The question then becomes, how do we move, not so much beyond Trump, because again, at the end of the day, Trump is nothing. He will become food for the worms one day. Trumpism is really our major concern here. How do we begin to dismantle this Trumpism that has, like a virus, infected this country to the point in where it will bring more death to the disenfranchised and the dispossessed?
Yeah, this is, I mean, Bishop Pearson, go ahead.
We need to hold his enablers responsible. The GOP has never been that monolithic about anything. This one point, they just won't budge. It's almost satanic. It's like they're under a spell, or demonic, if I could use that kind of terminology. These are intelligent men. Now, Vladimir Putin has got to be the happiest man on the planet, because he is, every day he's getting what he studied what Karl Marx said, religion is the opiate of the people. I'm sure Vladimir Lenin believed it. I know Vladimir Putin has believed it, and they've gone through their rituals. They have our country. China now has nuclear weapons. North Korea has nuclear weapons. I know they're talking behind closed doors. They have us. We may never be the power we once were. We'll be all right, but we're not going to be a world power. And it's not that important that we are. Part of the idea behind us being a world power is that we've got to evangelize the world and get everybody saved. And, you know, Jesus is the savior. And you know my thing about inclusion. The world's already saved. They just don't know it. And if they did, they stopped acting like they're not. Because we're not telling the gospel appropriately. We're trying to tell people to get saved. And then through the finished work of the cross, if you're a Christian, they are saved and safe with God, but they're not safe with us because we're judging them and putting them down, and we're hurting people. So that's a whole nother subject. And I know that's not the theme tonight, but the church has got to wake up and stop trying to be something it wasn't called to be, and shift our consciousness and start loving. When have you heard anything kind from the church? They picked a fight with the 21st century and now the 22nd century and this millennium. They said, no, we want make America great again means make America hate again legally. Hate them, make America hate. If you don't do, now, if the ballots don't work, they've got bullets. They say it's in God we trust. It's really in guns that they trust. So that's why there's so many bullets and so much military weapons out there and somebody getting shot. Most of the mass shootings in America are white people shooting white folk. They're angry at themselves, and they're angrier at the liberals and progressives, more angry at them than they are at blacks. They ain't shooting at us as much. They let us shoot ourselves by giving us guns. They're shooting each other. What you saw on January 6th, we saw 100 years ago here in Tulsa. And it was done like that all over this country in various cities where blacks were progressive. They were dropping bombs not on black people, but on black progress. And they see progress now, and they hate the process and are trying to interrupt that with all these voting laws and voting rules. They're going down. They know it. I don't want to sound unkind, but I don't want to sound too kind. I'm in the Jesus turn over the table stage. Take my whip out and pop somebody upside. I feel a little violence. God help me. Y'all pray my strength in the Lord. I want to slap somebody. But this is the bishop or the son of a bishop talking, whichever fits.
Oh, let me offer just one thing, because this is rich, this conversation. And I see the United States of America being among the youngest countries that have ever experienced being a superpower. And I know that we became a superpower on the back of chattel slavery, without question. That is who we are. That is what we've experienced. But we're young, comparatively. And I think that in our history, this is the first time since we proudly have flaunted our democracy all over the world, proudly flaunted our democracy. And this is interesting, proudly flaunted our democracy on the heels of slavery, which is an oxymoron, isn't it? Right? And now this young country has hit this wall that's been described right now, where we have someone that is in elected office who is completely dismantling everything that we said a democracy is. Historically, many nations have been through this water. some with kings, some with emperors, some with presidents. But there have been lots of despots from one place to the other and to the other and to the other. And I spent some time looking back to the question is, how did they get the hell out of that? If you understand what I'm saying, and move on to their what's next. And in every situation, just about to the letter, a bunch of people suffered. A lot of folks got killed. I want to say that soberly and cautiously, but to everything that we have said, that was a part of it. There had to be a before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave moment for the people. And then on the other side of that, there were leaders who rose up and declared that if I have to die in this process for the sake of the future of it, the potential future for freedom, I will do it. And something turns, and it becomes a moment of change. And in some nations, they've been together long enough for that cycle to have happened again and again and again. And to everyone's point tonight, and to everyone who is listening to us tonight, everyone, the thing that has always been problematic to date is that Christianity or religion played a very small part in the making of the peace.
Now,
a very small part in the making of the peace.
Yes, Dr. Miguel, I'm going to let you go, and then there are two questions that I really want to get to.
Yeah. Cesar Chavez once said, "I am not a nonviolent man. I am a violent man trying to be nonviolent." To your point, no revolution, no fight for justice, no attempt to create a more just society has ever occurred in the history of humanity without blood flowing in the streets. And unfortunately, it's always been the blood of the most marginalized and the most disenfranchised. So you are correct in saying that we need to say this very soberly. To call for justice is to call for bloodshed. All too often, our bloodshed. So it becomes a difficult conversation because I know what I am saying and I am afraid of what I am saying. But liberation of a people requires unbelievable sacrifice. And then to an earlier point, it becomes so much more tragic when after we begin to taste that liberation, our leaders betray the people and become like the oppressors that were overturned before. And in my own experience, I have seen that happen. So at times it just seems hopeless. And I think I am struggling with that hope, not struggling, but trying to understand that hopelessness. I wrote a book called Embracing Hopelessness as a way of understanding once there was nothing to lose, maybe that is when revolutionary change and praxis can begin.
Powerful, very powerful. There are two questions, which I think we answered this one, but the bottom line, must there be a redirection, redefining of the future churches of color to include new practices as defined by us, or quite simply religious emancipation? And that's not the first time I've heard someone ask about religious emancipation. And so I'm going to start with you, Dr. Miguel, and then go to Bishop Pearson and then Bishop Flunder.
In all my writings, I am an advocate that the way we've been doing church modeled after Eurocentric theology and philosophy must be totally rejected. This is a theology and philosophy that has been constructed to exclude us, to make sure that we have no voice. When the French cried out, liberté, égalité, and fraternité, they did not include the colonized people in Haiti, in Vietnam, or in Algiers. We need to create our own interpretation of the gospel based on our own culture and our own symbols and our own signs. Stoic philosophy and Greek philosophy does not resonate. We need to go back to the stories of our ancestors, and the stories of our own communities, and read the gospel through those lens. So to the right of the question, absolutely, we need to rethink what the gospel means and how we live out the gospel.
Thank you. Bishop Pearson?
The Hebrew writer said in the 6th chapter, therefore let us move beyond fundamental or elementary teachings about Christ and move on to, King James says, perfection. It means to go forward to spiritual maturity, not laying again the foundation of repentance from acts that lead to death, faith in God, instructions about cleansings or baptisms, the laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, all the stuff you preach, most evangelical churches preach every Sunday. This was 2,000 years ago. The writer said, get beyond that. Don't abandon it, but don't get stuck by it. Don't be defined by it or confined to it. Move on. That's the issue in my response to that question. Yes, Jesus said, unless I go, the comforter won't come. We don't know how to let Jesus go. That scares the hell out of Christians. Excuse the term, evangelicals. We got to let him go. He said, I'm with you to the end of the age. End of the aeon in Greek, the eon. We're at the end of a Christian age. I know that sounds intimidating and offensive to many. I don't mean to sound that way. And yet at the same time, I must. We're coming to an end of that paradigm. And all of us on this program tonight, and others, of course, are called, and I think coded, assigned, and designed to help create a new spiritual paradigm without which faith as we've known it will no longer exist. We've got to make the changes. The reason the churches have been shut down, and preachers can't get in the pulpit every Sunday and say, I can't get no help up in here. Turn to your neighbor. Ain't no way but neighbor to turn to. I mean, ain't nobody gonna hear it. So it's like nobody's on the Hammond B3 squealing back at us, and I love it like anybody else, and go to YouTube and listen and cry and shout and quicken all. But that's a powerful expression that served a powerful prophetic purpose. It's going to be different this time. I don't know how different. I don't know all the ways it will be different. Dr. Miguel, you are charged by God, if I could use that language, to write who gives you the right? You're called to do it. Your brilliance, your boldness, your courage. That Bishop Flunder, a same gender loving woman full of the Holy Ghost, worshiping in God, a bishop. I was there with her help consecration. Bishop-elect Vanessa doing this. You're courageous. You're out there. Y'all didn't come here knowing you were going to do this. All of a sudden, you're shifted, and our listeners are also expanding and growing and asking these powerful questions because you already know the answer when you ask it. Whoever asked that question, you knew the answer. You asked it so we could affirm it, because we all believe what you're asking. We believe the answer as well. So it's not going to be the same. I don't know what it's going to be, but it won't be what this is. It'll be better and not bitter.
Thank you, Bishop Pearson. Bishop Flunder.
My. So we're having church. Me and Mother Miller's over here sitting next to me. So we're literally having Pentecostal quickening. That's what's happening to us. But I'm reminded. There's a passage in that same writer in the book of Hebrews, which is probably one of my favorite books to read from, and it says, "For you have not come to a mountain that can be touched, and to a blazing fire, and to darkness and gloom, and to the blast of the trumpet and the sound of the words, which sound like those who beg that we don't want to go essentially any further." That was what was spoken to them. for they could not hear. Even if the beast touches the mountain, it would be stoned. So terrible was the sight. I became full of fear and trembling. But you have come to Mount Zion. I love this passage. To the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and the angels, and to the general assembly, the church of the firstborn enrolled in heaven. There's something very powerful about the writer in the 12th chapter of Hebrews encouraging people away from fear-based religion. And fear-based religion, which is the cudgel, the hammer, the weapon that is used to, has been used historically to oppress, to enslave, to destroy, to diminish people of color, people that are same gender loving, women, anyone that pushes back against this strong and wicked and unyielding patriarchy that is connected and somehow to the name of God. And I don't know how many cycles, beloved, those of you that hear us tonight, how many cycles of pushing back against this? How many times, how many marches, how many statements, how many? But I do believe that there is a point at which Mount Sinai must give way to Mount Zion. There's a point at which the fire and the smoke and the anger and the hatred and the fear of an angry God must give away to a relationship, a relational God, and a relational reality for us to have with one another. I believe that when that happens, God's kingdom comes and God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. I believe that with all my heart. I also believe we're moving toward it. It is a spiritual, what is the word I'm looking for? A spiritual evolution. And there will be bodies. There will be deaths. There will be losses. There will be power mongers that will think that when they killed us, we were dead. Like the foolish man who killed Martin Luther King. That was a foolish thing. He made a prophet out of a young preacher and turned him into streets and holidays and schools. He didn't intend to do that. He was a foolish man, and he was a tool of the divine in some ways. And I think you understand what I'm saying. It took that to make things go. So who knows how God will use this time, but I'm convinced that we are on our way, away from Sinai and its fear to Mount Zion, where the presence of God and the aura, the aroma of God sits always. I believe with all my heart. I'm on my way there. And I believe everyone who is listening to us, if you cast your eyes upon it, hallelujah. Excuse my Pentecostal moment. If you cast your eyes upon it, if you look toward it, if you believe what these pastors and leaders and teachers have said tonight, I believe we can embrace it the way Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego did in a hot place. We can embrace it even in the furnace that we are experiencing now. So thanks be to God.
Thank you, Bishop Flunder. I know the hour's growing late, but I must ask this last question. But I need to say something that Dr. Patrick Dugan has just said. He says, I feel that we are building the new paradigm every time we enter into this liminal conversation. The dynamic of your dialogue and all of us in virtual space, listening, asking questions, and being pushed beyond our theological boundaries. I say yes and amen to that. Thank you so much, Dr. Dugan. So this question comes from Reverend Naomi Washington Leapart, and she says, who is a part of TFAM as well. She says, I've been rereading sermons by Albert Klieg and others. I'm wondering, are we spending our brilliance on appealing to the moral sensibilities of people who have proven they have no moral courage or conviction? Should Black and brown people who have a revolutionary theology focus on building communities of mutual aid independent of white-led systems and institutions? In other words, as Stephen Ray might ask, can white people be saved? Well, Naomi, you have asked such a great question, and I'm going to start with Dr. Miguel.
To answer your question quickly, yes. Yes, that I always say people talk about speaking truth to power. I would argue power already knows the truth. Trump knows the truth of what he did. The congressional leaders who enable Trump know the truth of what they're doing. So to speak truth to power is to waste our energy. I rather speak truth to the powerless, to speak the truth that raises consciousness, to speak the truth that decolonize minds. It is the powerless that need to hear this truth, not the powerful, because they know what they are doing. And can white people be saved? As long as we understand that by the word white, we are talking about not skin pigmentation, but a world view of white supremacy that even people of color, some have adopted, then no, it cannot be saved. There cannot be white supremacists in heaven. The only way for white people, and by white again, I'm talking about not skin pigmentation, but the adoption of this white supremacist philosophy. The only way for white people to be saved is to crucify their whiteness and learn how to worship the Black Jesus, to worship the brown Jesus, to worship the Asian Jesus, to worship the queer Jesus. Only by worshiping that which has been most despised by society does one find their salvation.
Amen. Bishop Flunder, Bishop Pearson.
Go ahead, Bishop.
I just said that Negro was preaching. What he just said right there, that was powerful, Negro. That was powerful. Jesus. Oh, I've never heard it said that way, but I'll hear it again coming out of my mouth, and I'll give you the credit, and I'll keep the cash. There are millions of white people, color, Episcopalians, Unitarians, Presbyterian. There's a lot of non or less fundamentalist white people, millions of them, who agree almost 100%, if not 1,000%, with what we're saying. They get it. They've had it. Now, 84 million voted for Biden, 74 million or something like that voted for Trump. He still has 78% of the Republican support. But in the country, people of all ethnicities, but since we mentioned white people, yes, there's a whole lot of them that are very much ahead of the rest of them. They're on the cutting edge. They're very open. Whoever's behind all these commercials that I referred to earlier, with all the integrated couples and all that stuff, the theaters are saying it. The writers of movies and in the secular world, the church is almost muted. We will actually probably pay too much attention to it because the church is out of touch. It should be the headlight. It's the tail light. The people that are really saying something are not in our churches for some reason and don't feel comfortable coming and are not interested in coming. They have their own religions and their own reach, and it's all over the globe. So I for all of our white listeners or those who have many, many white friends, European or Caucasian friends, and I might add that some of the sweetest, most generous, kindest people I know are evangelical Christians. I've worked with them for all my life, especially the last 50 years down in Oklahoma. They're precious as long as they like you. Now, you won't get in trouble, Miguel, with them Southern Baptists, but you'll last as long as they like you. They'll keep your license. When you lose your credentials, call us. We'll get your credential, but try to stay there because they need you, and a lot of them too. They know what you're saying is accurate. They read your books. They're not going to repeat it because they can't stand the pressure. But they're hearing what you say, sir, just like we are, and they agree. There's a lot out there.
Bishop Flunder.
I've heard wonderful answers to these questions.
Yes.
And I think that the real heart and soul of it is where are we? Essentially, are we trying to create something or are we trying to resist something? And I think that the greatest resistance that we can have is to create. I believe that with all my heart. I think we have to put our skills, our abilities, our resources into creating the world that we really want to see. And that we cannot spend all of our time talking about what it's not. What can we create? And I do believe we have creative power. I believe we have, yes, Naomi, a revolutionary theology. And we've heard it again and again. Now, the question is, how long will we talk about it before we do something about it? Before we get ourselves in it? Before we get in harm's way for it? And if there are sisters and brothers, kindred out there that are white people that want to be a part of it, roll up your sleeves and prepare to suffer. Because you have to be prepared to suffer. If you're looking for a sanitized way to join this movement, I can tell you that the escape routes along the way, white escape routes, so you can dip out and then go down a few blocks and dip in, is not really what's going to make the change happen. The change happens when you're prepared to suffer, because you will suffer. Even among your own kind, you will suffer. And you will suffer. Let me just say it again. If you help Harriet Tubman, and you help Sojourner Truth, and you help Martin King, and you help Miguel de la Torre, and you help Carlton Pearson, and you help Yvette Flunder, you will suffer. Now, the question is, to what degree are you prepared to suffer? Can white people be saved? Can privileged people be saved? Can Black people in whiteface be saved? I'll say it again. If you're prepared to get in the struggle and deal with paying the cost, we can overcome together. That's when we boil it down to low gravy. That's when we are all in the soup together. That is when I believe justice can run down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Thank you, everyone, tonight. God bless.
That's beautiful. I just need to make this comment really quick. Dr. Karen Carlos says, as one born white in a white supremacist nation, I can say whiteness stole my soul. Only Black Jesus can help me reclaim it. I am ready to suffer with you. Amen. And ashe to you, Dr. Karen Carlo. Very, very powerful. Tonight, we want to thank all of you, our Facebook Live audience, our Instagram audience, YouTube and Twitter, for being with us. We ask you to continue to share this conversation even after we are done. We are grateful for Dr. Miguel A. de la Torre. Just everybody go get all his books, okay? Just Google them and just go one by one. Go to Amazon and just check it. Buy all the books so you can educate yourselves, right? And we don't have to spend a lot of time doing that. We're doing that on this show, but you educate yourself so you can educate your people and educate your people and educate your people, right? Because we here, we're talking, but there's something that you can do. And what you can do is purchase his books tonight. So we want you to make sure that you, again, share this Facebook Live. We appreciate the conversation tonight. Thank you so much, Bishop Flunder, Bishop Pearson. So glad to have you back with us. Amen. We are always grateful for your voice and for who you are in this earth. And to everyone else who is still here with us, again, we have some great shows lined up for you within the next coming weeks. Going into December, we ask that you continue to like our Facebook page and let folks know that we are here and we are doing the thing that needs to be done. We are creating. This is something that God has helped us create. We are creating, and they start with conversations. And I think that the more we talk, the more people grow and more people evolve. We're grateful for your presence tonight. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night. We're going to give you some commercials right now. Bishop Flunder.
God bless you and welcome again, everyone, to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I know that you are being blessed. I know that you're being helped. I know that you're being affirmed. And I'm going to ask you to please support our broadcasts by sending a donation via Cash App to Cash App TFAM Annual. That's Cash App TFAM ANNUAL, or to PayPal, www.paypal.me/TFAM TFAM Justice, TFAM Justice. God bless you. Support us. We'll keep going and we'll keep growing and we'll keep expanding and we'll keep changing the time in which we live. God bless each of you.
Hello everyone, this is Jess Dominic, owner of Bullet in Flight Radio, your story, our station, a proud supporter of progressive Christians from around the world. So please join us every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. until 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the best in gospel house, gospel indie, and inspirational word. And if you're looking to submit your music or sermons, please send us an MP3 and artist pick to bulletinflightpros@gmail.com. All submissions are free. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless.
And we have Lifestyle Global Properties. Donate to your church. Give to your church while accomplishing your goal of home ownership. Lifestyle Global Properties will donate 10% of the commission earned from your real estate transaction to your choice of City of Refuge or the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, also known as TFAM, in your name when you utilize our brokerage to purchase or sell a property, residential or commercial, in California or Georgia. If you want more information about that, please go online to Lifestyle Global Properties. The proprietor is Antonio Mattier. Triumphant Thursdays with Dr. P.J. Anderson, a breast cancer survivor story with special guest Bishop Bonnie L. Radin. She is the senior pastor of Refiner's Fire Fellowship United Church of Christ, as well as the bishop of the West Coast region of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. That's this Thursday, October 28th at 5 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so we ask that you join them on Facebook. You can go to @SFG, which stands for Space for Grace Without Walls, at Chaplain PJ, or you can go to @Chaplain PJ. You can also find them on Twitter and YouTube at Dr. PJ Anderson. RIM Virtual Experience TNT Tuesday Night Talks. RIM Fellowship United Church of Christ, located in Atlanta, Georgia. You can go to their website at www.rimatlanta.org. They invite you every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard for everyday, real, relevant, Bible-led conversations. And their senior pastor is Bishop-elect Sonia E. Williams. And you can find them again on their website. Check them out on Zoom and Facebook Live. We also have the Healing Place Apothecary, which is owned and operated and founded by Nubian Flunder, the LAC. You can go to the website. The website is www.THP, which stands for the Healing Place Apothecary.com. That's www.thpapothecary.com. And you will find items there for your skin to help you have healthier skin. Daily fruit, rose water, daily greens, black soap, root oil, so many wonderful things that you can purchase. Go to www.skymichelle.com, Sky Michelle's Teas and Things, where a kid is the boss. And she has a collection of t-shirts and she does customization as well. You can follow her on Instagram as well as Facebook at I Am Sky Michelle. And we have Kara Solutions. Focus on your passion. Let Kara handle the rest. The founder is Susan A. Webley, and she does remote production and video conferencing administration and tech support. Let Kara do the heavy lifting so that you can focus on your event. Custom branding, promo graphics, overlays, intro, outro videos, presentations, show development from planning to guest engagement, training on Zoom, StreamYard, Restream, and more. And if you want to find out more about her wide range of services, please visit her website at www.kara-solutions.com. If you want to advertise with Beyond the Gatekeepers, please feel free to email us at beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. That's beyondthegatekeepersshow@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us. Please support our broadcast. God bless you and have a great night.